Good evening and welcome to the City of Woodstock's virtual public planning meeting. Tonight's meeting is an open public planning meeting as required by the Planning Act. This meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube channel, and a recording of the meeting will also be posted on the city's website following the meeting. An agenda of the meeting can be found on the Agendas, Meetings, and Minutes page of the city's website. This meeting is for information and discussion purposes only, and no decisions will be made this evening. Council will make a decision on these matters at the regular council meeting to be held this Thursday, February the 17th at 1:30 p.m. If you wish to address council at that meeting as well, you must submit a delegation form to the city clerk no later than 2 p.m. on Tuesday. A delegation form is available on the city website. Due to the nature of a virtual meeting, the public has been asked to submit a request to speak in advance to allow a pre-meeting test with our IT department. Those wishing to make a presentation will join the meeting via video conference, while those wishing to provide comments or answer questions only will call into the meeting via telephone. When recognized by the chair to speak, you must provide your name and address for the public record before giving comments. Only the applicant or people who provide oral or written comments regarding the application are entitled to appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Please keep your comments to planning matters only and avoid repeating comments that have already been expressed. If you have not provided oral or written comments, but wish to receive formal notice of council's decision on the matter, please contact the clerk's department. The notice will provide further information on appealing the decision. The planner will be asked to present the planning report for each application. The applicant will then be provided the opportunity to make comments, followed by those wishing to speak in favor of the application, and then followed by those wishing to speak in opposition to the application. Prior to proceeding with the first application, does anyone wish to declare a pecuniary interest on any items that are on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the first application, B12-102-8, A21-29-8, application for consent and minor variance, JJZ Developments, Inc., 1256 Parkinson Road. The subject lands are described as Part Lot 15 and Part 5, 41M206 in the city of Woodstock. The lands are located on the north side of Commerce Way, south of Parkinson Road, and west of Universal Road, and are municipally known as 1256 Parkinson Road. The applicant proposes to create vacant industrial lot. The applicant has also applied for a minor variance to reduce the rear yard depth between the existing building on the retained lands and the new lot line that will be created via this consent. And I'm going to call on our senior planner, Andrea Hackler, to go over the application, please.
Thank you. So, excuse me, this application, as Councillor Talbot has pointed out, is an application for a severance and a minor variance, and the applicant is essentially proposing to create a vacant industrial parcel and retain an industrial parcel which currently has a couple of industrial buildings on it. Council may recall that these lands were before council a number of months ago, and what the applicant proposed at the time was to sever these lands from this land, or from these lands, and it was again to create a vacant industrial parcel. And so in this case, the applicant is also proposing to decrease the requirement for the rear yard depth, and that's simply based on the fact that they're proposing to the lot line closer to this existing building. And so they're proposing to go from 7.5 meters to 5 meters. And the subject lands are a total of, the severed lands are 5.1 acres and the retained lands are 4 acres. So two fairly sizable industrial parcels. And so basically what the applicant is proposing to do is create a parcel for future development, which staff are supportive of. This is something that staff really appreciate because it's an underutilized parcel, and we like to see it redeveloped, especially in light of actually another application that I'll be bringing forward to council tonight is that we are in need of industrial lands and industrial development within the city. So this is an application that we are happy to support. The subject lands are zoned M3, which is a general industrial zone, and both parcels meet all of the minimum requirements for the M3 zone, with the exception of the variance that's being requested. The building department included a number of conditions that are fairly standard. Aside from, they have requested that a condition be included with respect to the spatial separation requirements of the building code, and that's with respect to the building to the proposed lot line, and so that has been included as a list of conditions. There were a number of other conditions that were required by the engineering department, and those have been included, as well as a condition from Union Gas. The application was circulated to the public. We did receive a letter from a neighboring property owner. I have gotten back to the property owner. Generally, we don't feel that the subject application affects the concerns that the property owner has raised, and we mostly feel that those concerns are a civil matter that are related to between two neighbors. There was a drainage concern that was raised, and city engineering has been out to that site several times to look into that, and so they felt that no further action was required in that manner. And so in light of that, we're supportive of the application. As I indicated, we feel that it's a great use of an underutilized site. It's in keeping with the Commerce Way Business Park policies, and we're satisfied that the reduced rear yard setback won't have a negative impact on grading or drainage of the site, or maintenance or access around the building. And as I indicated earlier, we've included a number of conditions if this application is approved.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions of council through to our senior planner? Seeing none, I'll call on Mr. Steve Jefferson. You're the applicant. Do you have any further comments that you'd like to make?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Steve Jefferson. I'm a land use planner with K-Smart Associates at 85 McIntyre Drive in Kitchener, Ontario, and we represent the landowner JJZ Developments, Inc. Provide my thanks to Andrea Haschler and her work with us so far as we've worked this application through the process. I've reviewed the staff report with our client, and we have no concerns or objections to the proposed conditions within the report. For your information, I would like to point out that when we were preparing the application and in discussions with staff, the question of the spatial separation report was evident. So an engineer has already prepared a report and was submitted with the application package to demonstrate that the proposed rear yard will meet the requirements of the building code, but we'll work with city staff to allow them to provide any feedback on that study as well. With respect to the comments from the neighbor, I also reviewed that with our client. He is aware of the issues. They have had different meetings on site, and steps have been taken to try and resolve the issues as well as possible in this particular situation. Again, I appreciate the recommendation in the staff report. We support that recommendation, and I'm available to answer any questions that there may be at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Any questions from council through to Mr. Jefferson? Councillor Schadenberg? You're on mute. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Talbot. From our chair through to Steve Jefferson, you said that you were fine with the provisions of any kind of conditions put on it. Obviously, the Commerce Way has been serviced for a number of years, and there would be an additional cost towards attaching your building to the services that the city of Woodstock has already put on. Can you speak to that as far as your experience and the fact that you've obviously worked on other similar commercial structures, whether they be in Kitchener or elsewhere, as far as hooking up to existing and not having a problem or not to the services?
Excuse me, Councillor Schadenberg, that's not really what we're here discussing tonight. This is the planning application. I think that's more of a, it's more about the severance and the boundaries. Unless,
fair enough.
Unless you feel, Mr. Jefferson, if you'd like to answer that. I mean, I think it's a little bit off, but if you'd like to answer it, you may.
Yes, I could very briefly. Our client, as mentioned, did sever one lot off of this property previously, and they're well aware of the city policies and costs for connections. So there are no surprises with those types of details.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Schadenberg? No. Anyone else have anything else they'd like to ask? I just want to double check. You said that the owner had met with the ushers regarding any concerns that they did have?
Yes, it was Friday I spoke with Mr. Smith on behalf of the ownership group, and he provided a summary of the different meetings and steps that they've taken since he assumed ownership of the property approximately 2 years ago. And so yes, he's made efforts to try and resolve the different points that have been raised.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no further questions or comments from council, and there have been no registered delegates to speak either in favor or against Mr. Jefferson, so this application will come before council on Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the second application, ZN 8-17-8, application for zone change at Supplementary Port 1666144 Ontario Limited, 95 Victoria Street South. Its subject lands are described as Part Block A, Plan 160, PTS 3-10, 41R9470, Parts 1 and 2, 41R9470, Part Lots 19 and 20, Concession 1, East Oxford, Part Lots 7, 8, 10, and 12, north side of Henry Street, Plan 212 of the City of Woodstock. The lands are located on the north side of Henry Street, south of the CN Railway, and east of Wellington Street South, and are municipally known as 95 Victoria Street South. The applicant proposes to rezone the subject property from Transitional Industrial Zone M4 and Highway Commercial Zone C4 to Special Highway Commercial Zone C4 Special and Special Transitional Industrial Zone M4SP to satisfy conditions of recently approved severance applications B1226-8 and B2044-8, and to facilitate the development of a 3-story commercial industrial building. I'll send the floor over to you, Andrea, and you can tell us about this application, please.
Thank you. So this application, as Councillor Talbot pointed out, is a supplementary report for an application for zone change. The application, so first of all, let's give a little tiny bit of history. The subject application was, or these subject lands were previously subject to a couple of severances where the applicant proposed lot additions and then also to further sever these lands from the larger C4 parcel. And so at this point in time, the applicant is proposing to rezone the lands to ensure consistency amongst both or all of the properties. So in this case, the applicant is proposing the lands that were previously added to be C4 from M4. And then in this parcel, there's an M4, a C4, or M4 and C4 zones. And so the applicant was requesting to rezone the lands to a C4, which is a highway commercial zone. And they actually were asking for a site-specific amendment to include a number of additional uses. So the underlying designation for the lands is a traditional industrial designation. And so generally speaking, a C4 highway commercial zone does not, it's generally not supported by the traditional industrial designation. In the case of the westerly parcel, the lands have been zoned C4 for a significant amount of time. There's an existing building on the property. It's a hotel and restaurant, which are currently under renovation right now. And historically, that's the type of use that has been located on that site. So the official plan allows for us to make minor expansions to uses and zones that were legally established. So that's how we are supporting the lot addition and then rezoning the northern portion of that parcel to a straight C4. So then we could have consistent use or consistent zone across the board there. The applicant is proposing just to provide parking on the north side of the hotel and restaurant site. And so in our opinion, that just only benefits the parcel even more when the restaurant and hotel are up and running, then there will be ample parking on the site. The applicant is proposing on the easterly side to rezone the parcel to have the special highway commercial zone. We have recommended in this case that they maintain the industrial zoning instead of a highway commercial zone, but we've added a number of the highway commercial uses that the applicant has requested. And so we just simply were recommending that we maintain that M4 zone, a transitional industrial zone on the site because it's consistent with the designation. We're supportive of a mix of uses on that site, transitional industrial, as well as some highway commercial uses. We've made sure that the uses that we're recommending do not conflict with uses that should and would be located in the downtown. And we've more recommended uses that would be compatible with the area. We feel that rezoning these lands is actually a great opportunity to provide a bit of a buffer between the railroad and then the residential uses to the south. The lands up and down Henry Street are fairly transitional. There's some industrial uses, some kind of commercial uses, and some residential uses. So we felt that that it would be a good opportunity to rezone these lands to allow for a mix of those lighter industrial and commercial type uses. The applicant, as Councillor Talbot pointed out too, is long-term proposing to build a 3-story commercial industrial building on the subject property. And they've provided us with a site plan. Staff are supportive of the site plan. We've gone back and forth and worked with the applicant on it. The building department has indicated that there are a couple of special provisions that would be required for the site, which we are supportive of as well. And it just will help with the ease of the two sites. It's recognizing existing parking setbacks, which are nil onto Henry Street. And then also allowing the two sites to work together, even though there will be different properties. So just recognizing that they'll have kind of like parking and access will be shared across the two sites. So in light of that, we recommend that this application be approved. We think it's a good opportunity to redevelop an underutilized site. And we feel that it's generally in compliance with the policies of the official plan.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions of council through to Andrea? And I believe Terry DaCosta is with us tonight, but is not making a presentation and is here to answer any questions of council if there are any. Any questions through? Okay, seeing none, thank you. And this application again will be dealt with at our council meeting on Thursday at 1:30. Moving on to our final application, OP 20058, application for official plan amendment, Southeast Woodstock Secondary Plan, City of Woodstock. The subject lands are generally described as part lots 7-12, concession 1 Blandford, lots 10-14, concession 2, and part of lots 20-21, concession 3 East Oxford in the City of Woodstock. The subject lands are located on the north side of Dundas Street between Highway 401 and Blandford Road, on the south side of Dundas Street between Oxford Road 4 and Highway 53 to Patullo Avenue. Additional lands included in the proposed amendment are located on the southwest side of the city, south of Highway 401, between Mill Street and Norwich Ave. The extent of the lands subject to these amendments are illustrated on the attached official plan amendment schedules. The application proposes to implement the recommendations of the East Woodstock and Southeast Woodstock secondary plans and to redesignate the subject lands to facilitate a broad range of primarily industrial and service commercial uses. And I'll call again on our senior planner, Andrea Haschler, to go over the application.
Thank you. So council will be very familiar with this application and with these lands. These lands are lands that were annexed into the city from the township of Norwich as of January 1st, 2018. Sorry, I should specify that's these lands and then the small triangular piece of land. In total, the subject lands are 1,531 or 32 acres, which were brought in from the township of Norwich. And then in addition to that, this application is also proposing an official plan amendment to designate and bring these lands, the East Woodstock lands, into the city as well. So the East Woodstock lands were approved back in 2008. And they were under the East Woodstock secondary plan, and that was around the same time as the Toyota lands came in. So at the time, what happened is the lands were brought into the corporate boundary, they were annexed in, but they were not brought into the settlement boundary. So at this point in time, the official plan amendment proposes to designate the lands for employment purposes, so industrial and service commercial, and then also to bring those lands into the settlement boundary. And so essentially meaning that we can go ahead and service the lands and start developing, and the lands can start to be developed. And so similarly, with the Southeast Woodstock lands, we are proposing, or the official plan amendment proposes to designate the lands in accordance with the Southeast Woodstock secondary plan, which was just recently undertaken. And so what we're proposing to do at this point in time is to bring in phase 1 of the East Woodstock or the Southeast Woodstock lands. And we are proposing to designate those lands, bring them into the settlement boundary, and then the remaining lands, in addition to that small triangular portion on the southwest side of Woodstock, we're proposing to just designate those lands to future urban growth, and then with a long-term plan to eventually bring those lands also into the settlement boundary and designate them also for employment purposes. So the subject lands for now are the bigger picture is the future urban growth, as well as the phase 1 and the East Woodstock lands. But more importantly, the phase 1 and the East Woodstock lands are what are being designated for the settlement boundary or the settlement area. And so what we took these, council will be familiar with the secondary plan that was undertaken for these lands, and the servicing study, as well as a number of the other studies. They were brought to council a number of months ago for council's approval, which council has approved. So at this point in time, and then with that, council had recommended that staff go back and apply for the official plan amendment. And so here we are. And so along with these types of large projects, we hired consulting staff, engineering and planning, and they undertook the necessary studies to meet the requirements of the provincial policy statement for a comprehensive review. And we also hosted a couple of public meetings with the public that wanted to attend, that had an interest in this area. And so the first public meeting was in May 2019, and the second one was in November 2019. And so the first one, basically we gather feedback, and then the second one is we propose, and we give a number of options. And the second one is we have a preferred land use concept, which would have resembled what we have. I'm pointing at at my other screen, which no one's seen. So the other screen is the mapping. My apologies. And so we came back with that preferred land use plan, which shows a road network. It shows stormwater management areas and the servicing corridors. And we solicited any sort of additional public feedback, and then we took those comments into consideration as well. So what we've ended with is this proposal. And as you can see, the subject lands are being proposed to be redesignated for a service commercial and business park type development in the north, so just south of Dundas Street. And then the rest of the lands are being proposed for traditional industrial uses, as well as any natural heritage features that were identified are being proposed to be designated for environmental protection purposes. So generally, when we establish these secondary plans, we going forward, we use this as a roadmap of how these lands should be developed. We look to see where the future road networks are proposed. And then as proposals come forward, then we ask applicants to generally be in keeping with the proposals, with the secondary plan. So I don't want to take too long to go through this, because I know council is very familiar with these types of processes. The city has seen annexations before and secondary plans, and there seem to be at least one more coming later this year. So I won't spend too much time, but basically the provincial policy statement requires us to check a number of boxes, and so we need to ensure that we've looked to see if there's any alternative directions for growth. We check to see if there's specialty crops in the area. The idea is that ideally you can develop lands or look to bring lands in that are more marginal. In this case, Oxford County has some of the best land in the province. So we have classes 1 to 3. So we take that into consideration. We take into consideration existing livestock facilities in the area. And then we also take into consideration servicing and how we can service the sites and whatnot, and natural heritage features amongst many other things. In this case, we've recommended that for the time being, just phase 1 comes in. There are a number of livestock facilities within the 1.5 meter area outside of the settlement area, or within this annexed area, and then outside of the annexed area. And so as you can see, there is a barn on the south side of Patulo, which creates a significant MDS arc. And so because of that, for the time being, we won't be bringing any of those lands in, so as to not affect that livestock operation. And then as you can see, it kind of, it's like a ripple effect, because once you have the one arc, you create several other arcs within that area. And so for the time being, this is our phase 2 area, which is what we had also hoped to bring in. But as you can see, this was an unconfirmed MDS arc. We didn't have all the information relating to the livestock facility. Since the public notice went out, we actually were in contact with the owner, and he's provided us with the information. However, I wasn't certain on the calculations and how big the arc would be. So I thought for the time being, we should leave it out, and we will confirm that the calculations and the arc, and then we will move forward on that. So my hope is that after discussions with the owner and potentially seeing if there's a way that we can justify bringing these lands in, then we would bring phase 2 in later on this year. There is also, I should point out, there is also a small arc that falls on phase 1 from a livestock facility that falls on the east side of the 401. However, the MTO requires a 14-meter setback on either side of the 401. And then also the livestock facility, we don't anticipate that it would expand closer to the 401 based on those setbacks. And then also there's obviously the 401 that falls between any sort of future development on on the west side, and then from the existing livestock facility. So we felt that that was enough justification to still be able to bring in all of phase one, and we don't think that it'll have a negative impact on that livestock facility. We circulated the applications to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and through that circulation, they recirculate to the various agencies or ministries within or at the province. And we did have a meeting with MMH, and they indicated that they had no concerns. However, they did not submit any sort of written correspondence. So we just had that meeting with them. We worked with MTO for the past couple of years on this proposal on the secondary plan. They're very familiar with it. They did indicate that that they did feel that there are some, intersections that could use improvement, and the city engineering department has since those discussions has started an EA, and I believe the EA is complete, and it will be sent out for public information in the near future. We undertook an archaeological assessment as well. It was just a stage one. There were a number of cultural heritage points of interest that have been detailed in the assessment. And going forward, if there's development that occurs in any of those areas, then a more detailed assessment will be required. So a phase two to potentially protect the feature or to decide what the next steps would be with it. The proposal was circulated to Upper Thames and the Grand River Conservation Authority. The Grand River Conservation Authority deferred all commenting to Upper Thames very early on in the process because the majority of the lands fall within the Upper Thames. The engineering department indicated that these studies are fairly high level that are undertaken, servicing studies, and then traffic studies, whatever else. And so at time of development, we will obviously be requiring more detailed studies at that time. But generally, the secondary plan and the associated studies are to ensure that it's feasible, to identify land uses, to identify areas that need to be protected, and such. And then just to go back to those East Woodstock lands, obviously all of those studies were undertaken back in 2008 and approved. And it just at the time was not justified that those lands were needed to be brought into the city. So we also received, so we had the multiple public information sessions. We also, through the public notice, we received a letter from a concerned property owner in the area. The property owner I have spoken with a couple of times. They have a large hog operation that actually falls south of Petulo, and they're over in this area, I think where it says number 5. And so they just had concerns that potentially any sort of redesignation would impact the regular operation of their facility. And I did share with him the mapping, and I showed him that at this point in time, those lands are not coming in or not being proposed to come in. So that's part of phase 6. So it's much down the road. So he said that he did not have any concerns. He just wanted his comments to be on file, and then going forward, we could have any further discussions with him as lands are developed over time. So the other part of the comprehensive review is as I've kind of alluded to, is there's a land need justification. So the county undertook, as I'm sure council recalls, we undertook a phase 1 comprehensive review, and that's where we identify future growth projections. And then we also we go through a vacant land inventory, and we identify what lands are available within the municipal boundaries, and then what would be the anticipated land need going forward. At the time when we undertook that, and also when this secondary plan, when these studies commenced, the provincial policy statement indicated that we could plan on a 20-year horizon. So that would have gotten us to 2039. However, since then, the provincial policy statement has changed, And they've indicated now that we can plan on a 25-year horizon. And so based on that, it was indicated that the overall, and I mean, if I'm going too quickly, council can ask me to go back and provide any additional details. But basically what it equated to is that the total net land need going forward was going to be 337 hectares or 833 acres. And so the subject application proposes with the East Woodstock lands and the Southwest or Southeast Woodstock lands, it's proposing a 204 hectare or 503 acre settlement area for employment purposes. And so again, all these lands are being proposed for industrial and service commercial type uses. And so based on that, we were able to justify that these lands for the time being are adequate to come in. And again, like I indicated, we will continue to work on bringing in phase 2 if we can work through the MDS issues. So a number of other studies obviously were undertaken. There is natural heritage, infrastructure, transportation. I should point out too that the phasing is tied to the servicing hierarchy. So basically where we can service at what time, what's most accessible from a servicing perspective, and from a transportation perspective are the lands that are identified as obviously phases 1 and phases 2. And then, so the East Woodstock secondary plan lands are total gross area of 423 acres, and which will equate to a net developable area of 256 acres. And we're satisfied that, yeah, as I indicated, those lands can come in, and they just were not needed at the time. So the other thing that I should point out is that we have received an application for a zone change, and it's for lands, and I believe that's why we have a delegate tonight. It's for lands located along Oxford Road 4, south of Dundas Street. And the applicant has requested a temporary use bylaw because the lands are currently zoned under the Norwich zoning bylaw to allow a truck terminal. And then there was a temporary use bylaw through the Township of Norwich that allowed for truck sales and servicing. And so to honor the existing use, it's never our intent to take those uses away or to create a hardship for a business. So I have recommended to the applicant that they amend their application based on the official plan amendment that's before council tonight. And we would prepare a zone change that would allow this to be a continued use in this area. They're also proposing to expand their development or expand their existing truck terminal, which I'm sure council's familiar with. It's been there for many years. And they would like to add warehousing to that, which generally speaking, like they're proposing that like a service component, a sales component, and then a warehousing component, and then as well as the truck parking. And so those are uses that are generally supported in that area, with the exception of the truck terminal. But we do want to honor the fact that it's a long-standing use, and we're not looking to create a hardship there. And so we will be able to address that through the zone change that is on file right now with our office. And then just so staff are supportive of the application, we feel that the consultants have addressed through the various studies, have addressed the requirements of the provincial policy statement. We feel that the need for these employment lands are there. Council has seen many industrial applications come forward, and we are well aware that the city is running out of employment lands, and so this is a valuable next step for the city in incorporating these lands into the settlement area. And And then just to recap, any lands that are not being brought into the settlement area will be designated future urban growth. They'll stay in the corporate boundary, but we will provide policies in the official plan that'll identify the long-term intended use for these lands being employment lands. And so in light of our review, we are recommending that this official plan amendment be supported by City Council, and I am happy to answer any questions that any councillors may have.
Thank you for that very thorough explanation, Andrea. That was great. Are there any questions of council through to Andrea? Seeing none, I'm going to call on Andrea Sinclair, who is speaking on behalf of a client who has property within the area under discussion. Andrea?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the other Andrea for sort of pre-warning you about what I'm here to speak about today. So very much in support of these lands being brought in. My client's property is within the phase 1 land, so it's an exciting thing to be having more lands come in and the city having a need for more employment land. Also appreciate the special policy consideration that staff are recommending, which would allow service commercial, but also some other uses such as the warehousing and other types of uses. Our client more recently purchased this property, which, as Ms. Hackler mentioned, included a truck transport use, which is the primary use that they bought the property for. My client, Greenway Carriers, is a truck company, but also very much keen to redevelop the vacant parts of this property and bring more employment and more uses into the city. However, when we first looked at this, we were concerned just with the depth of the lot and some of the access restraints to Dundas if service commercial on its own would really be viable. So the addition of other uses is very much appreciated, and I think will help this land be able to redevelop. Our real So like I said, we're generally in support of the secondary plan. We weren't involved in the previous public meetings just because at that point our client didn't own the property. Our real concern when reading through the staff report was just making sure that that existing transport use that's already permitted by the current zoning continues to be permitted. And Ms. Hackler's sort of resolved that concern through her comments. It's a little bit in terms of we just weren't able to connect before this public meeting and wanted to make sure that we were on the record, but generally in support. And I think through the zone change application we've submitted, we can make sure that use continues while expanding to have other uses on the property. The truck transport use as it is currently located is a fair distance south of Dundas. So I think there's an opportunity to still develop the vacant portion of the lot north of that while keeping the truck transport. And there is going to be a real synergy, for lack of a better word, between future warehousing type uses and that existing truck terminal. So it is very important to our client that that use continue to be permitted. And we just wanted to make sure the secondary plan wasn't going to create an issue down the road for us. And it sounds like that won't be the case. So thank you for the time this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we look forward to the lands being brought in.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions of council through to Andrea Sinclair on behalf of the owner? Seeing none, thank you very much, Andrea. And there are no other delegations for this application this evening. And I will remind you that you have the opportunity to speak at council if you would like, as long as you register by 2 tomorrow. And this application will be dealt with Thursday at 1:30 at our regular council meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any further business of planning this evening? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Petter, Councillor Accioni. All those in favor?